Story Church, or that you decided to join us online. And so you can be up to speed with where we're at right now. We are in the 7th week of a series titled The GOAT, the greatest of all time. And we're walking through Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. This is the greatest sermon of all time. That's where the series title comes from. And so if you want to follow along, we're going to be in the first book of the New Testament, Matthew, and we're going to be in chapter 6 today. We've covered chapter 5, we've been walking through chapter 6, and next week we'll be jumping into chapter 7. Now, last week, Lisa shared with us from Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 through 34. Lisa did an incredible job, by the way. I was so thankful for her teaching. But we're going to go back a little bit this week to Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24, where Jesus talks about treasure, because we jumped over that passage, and I want to go back to it. And that's where we're going to be this week. And before we even talk about verses 19 and 20, I want to read to you Matthew chapter 6, verse 21, when Jesus says this. He said, "Show me your treasure, and I'll show you where your heart is." In other words, show me what you value the most, and I'll show you where your heart is. This is a thought-provoking idea. If we just sit here for a moment and we can try to wrestle with, what do I treasure? What is it that I value above all else? What is it? And Jesus is saying, whatever that is, that's where your heart is. That's what you're wrapped up in. But we live in such a way that it's difficult at times for us to even identify or consider what it is that we treasure or value the most, because a lot of us have more stuff than what we really need, if we were to be honest. Not too long ago, I was up in the morning, and I usually get up before Kim in the morning, and I was walking around in our bedroom, and I had thought of this is what I'm going to wear today. And then I had this moment of, wait, I should turn on my iPhone flashlight and go through my clothes, because what if I own something and I forgot that I even own it, and I could wear that today instead? Some of you might have this problem as well. Some of you might be thinking, Scott, you have a problem. I do have a problem. Why do I have so many clothes that I could think to myself, oh, I might have something that I forgot about? I might have something that I forgot that I even own that, and maybe that's what there was another time recently I was on Amazon, I ordered a book, and Kim looked at what I ordered, she said, Scott, we already own that book. I was like, what? No, we don't own that. But she says, yes, I do. I'll show you where we have it. We have that book already. I was like, no, we don't have this book. I wonder if any of you have done this before. You had something, but you didn't realize you had it because we're cluttered. We have a lot of stuff. And not only are we cluttered with physical things and material things that we've accumulated, and I have this, and then we forget even what we have sometimes, we are also cluttered mentally, because all of us have these smartphones now, and they were intended to make our life more simple, to make our life a little easier, to make our life less cluttered, but really they've added more clutter. They've added more distraction in deciphering what is it that we exactly value. I remember a time growing up, this was many, many years ago, because I'm getting so old now. This was so many years ago, when we would take a trip as a family, and I would have to sit in the back of the car with nothing to do. Absolutely nothing. I had no phone to scroll. I just had to sit and look out the window and watch everything go by. And it was so very boring. And finally, around middle school time, I wonder if any of you had these, I finally got a portable DVD player. It was the best thing in the world, and I could watch movies when we would go somewhere as a family so that I wouldn't be so bored in the car. And then one day, I finally got a phone so I could be entertained. We're at a time now where people who are not even passengers in cars, but who are driving cars, we can't wait to get from one stoplight to the next so that we can check our phone and see what it is that we missed out on. What else could be going on? Who else can I connect with? Who else can I talk to right now? We're so cluttered in our minds. I remember a time when you used to go somewhere and you'd be waiting in line, and you would just have to stand and wait in line. And maybe, just maybe, even talk to somebody you've never met before. I know that sounds like a wild idea, right? But you actually had to talk to people every once in a while. And we would talk to people, and we would stand in line, and they had nothing to do. But now, if I have to go stand in line somewhere, and I forgot my phone, I'm kicking myself the entire time thinking, why do I not have my phone with me? Because waiting through this line and not having something to do or someone to talk to, it's brutal. I can't do this. And we're constantly filling our minds with more and more information. We don't know how to shut it off. And so we're cluttered physically with material goods. We're cluttered mentally with all the digital things that we're always taking in and all the things we're scrolling in. And we have so much clutter, so much going on, that it's even difficult for us to identify what is it that I value. Because we're trying to have involvement in our hands in literally everything. And we're addicted to consume more material goods or consume more digitally, whatever it is. We consume, and this consumerism has led to clutter. But as we walk through Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24 today, I believe that Jesus wants us to get to a point where we have some clarity, where we can clarify what our treasure is, what we value the most, and we can actually start valuing things that matter, things of eternity, instead of that which is just temporary or fleeting. And so instead of today giving you points as we write down the message, I framed this message, I've done this before, with a series of questions as we walk through the text today. And these are questions you can take notes and write them down, either discuss them with God in your prayer time later, or discuss them in your story group with another group of believers. I would challenge you to walk through these questions and these concepts and walk through this text with someone else or with somebody else who will help you grow in this. So the first question is this: what do you treasure or value? It's really what we started with. What do you treasure or value above all else? And because of all that we consume, it can be difficult for us to identify what is it that I value above all else. But maybe what you value above all else is just consuming things. Maybe that's what you value. Maybe that's not you, though. Maybe what you value is a title. And you've been working your entire life to get this specific title. And you finally have it. You finally have the title that you've been longing for so that people can refer to you with that title. But lately, God has been leading you somewhere else and saying, that's actually not what I want you to do. You're saying, but I don't want to let go of this title. I've done everything to get this. And God is saying, I know. But I want you to surrender that thing that you treasure so much, because there's something different I have in store for you. And to take that step of faith is so complicated and difficult. The concept that Jesus talks about in this passage that we're going to get today is money. And maybe for you, that is what you value above all else. Maybe that's what you treasure. Maybe it's money, and you have a really difficult time being generous and helping others and reaching out, caring for others, because you think, this is mine. I worked for it. I'm going to hold on to it. And so to release that, or to be generous with it, or recognize that it's God who actually gave you the ability to earn that money, that's a really difficult thing for you to wrestle with in your heart. Because that's what you value above all else. Got to save, got to have this, got to have. And I'm not saying to not be wise with your finances. But maybe that's the thing that above all else you value and you've been following. Or maybe it's just the affirmation or the acceptance of a certain group. And you're finally in that group and you're thinking, why did I do all of these things that compromise my convictions just so that these people would accept me? Why is that? Why have I treasured and valued the acceptance of this group above all else? Maybe it's something else, I'm not sure, but what is it that you treasure and value? And Jesus starts to get us to question in our hearts and minds where we're at with this. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 20, Jesus said, "Don't store up treasure on earth. Moths and rust will eat it away, and robbers will break in and steal it. No, store up for yourselves treasure in heaven. Moths and rust don't eat it away, and there no robbers break in and steal it." Now, sometimes we've taken this passage and we've reduced it to, oh yeah, everything in this world and this earth is just meaningless, throw it away. And when we pray prayers, that means we're investing in something eternal, and everything here is just going to go away and be done with one day. And I don't really think that's what Jesus is saying here. In fact, I don't think that's a full vision of the gospel and of God's full creation story coming about, because Revelation actually says that he is going to one day make all things new, not all new things. Sometimes our vision is, oh, he's just going to get rid of everything and then he's going to make all new things. No, he's going to make all things new. So his recreation, his new creation, his eternal work is at work in the present. The eternal life is that they know me, Jesus said in John 17. So this eternal life begins now, and Jesus is getting at living a life that has an eternal focus and an eternal impact. Jesus isn't saying, oh yeah, just, whatever with this world, and one day you'll get to the right place, and that's just what you need to worry about. No, Jesus is getting to this idea that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 15:58, that the work that we do for the Lord is not in vain, because what we do in the name of Christ is connected to that which is eternal. There's an eternal work that's happening. There's an eternal work that's going on. And so Jesus is getting at this idea of our heart and our actions and what we do and how we spend our time. And it's a challenge to invest in eternity and not just invest in that which is temporary. And oftentimes what we find is that which is temporary is self-centered. It's about looking out for me and my stuff and my kingdom. And Jesus is saying, no, step into a broader kingdom. Live in something that's beyond yourself. And that's his way into eternity, the way that we've been designed to live in. And so it's not just about, oh, this is all fleeting and meaningless. It's about investing in the creation in such a way, recognizing that God is doing his redemptive work here and now, and that's a foreshadowing of what's to come. We've been invited to participate in eternity and not invest in those things which are just temporary and not allow those things to be what we value above all else. James, the brother of Jesus, expands on this in James chapter 5 when he says this, "Now look here, you rich. Weep and wail for the horrible things that are going to happen to you. Your riches have rotted, and your clothes have become moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will bear witness against you, and will eat up your flesh like fire." James is, like Jesus, directly addressing wealth and money here because he knows that that's such a great temptation to want to value and build our own temporary kingdom instead of investing in God's eternal kingdom work. And he's saying those things will eat you up. When you live for the temporary, when we have temporary idols, those things will begin to eat us up. James says that, you could summarize it this way. James is revealing that idolatrous treasures will consume you. They will eat you alive. These temporary treasures, these temporary idols, they will fully consume you and eat you alive. Some people say it this way: we become what we worship. And worship is not just something that you do on a Sunday morning when we sing along with the songs, although that's a part of it. Worship is a way of life, and we become what we worship. But more on that later. What I do want to say for a moment here is how thankful I am that in the 3 years of New Story Church that we've been doing this, that you have been such a generous church with your finances, with your time, with your resources. And because of you, more and more people are having and experiencing the gospel and experiencing a kingdom impact. I was just talking with a friend of mine recently, Pastor Frankie of Garden Church. He's been at some of our worship nights before. Some of you may have been to his services. He has services on Saturday night. You should check them out. They're incredible. It's a new church plant that started here in Buffalo earlier this year, and we were able to, because of your generosity, financially support them. And I was talking with Frankie, and Frankie has another ministry that he's involved with at an apartment complex, and he gathers some people together for a Bible study. And he said just 2 weeks ago, when he was at this Bible study, he met a woman named Lisa. And Lisa, if you're watching, by the way, hello. You'll see why I'm saying that in just a moment. But Frankie was talking with Lisa and talking with her about finding a home church and getting connected. And Lisa said to Frankie, "I'm not able to make it to church on Sundays, but I have a home church. I watch New Story Church online every week. Pastor Scott Lackey's my pastor." And so Frankie texted that to me. And I thought, that's just so incredible. And the reason that happens, that we're able to reach and connect with people like Lisa, the reason we're able to reach and connect with people like you is because there are people who are generous with their time, that show up every Sunday morning at 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m., and they start setting up everything here at New Story Church. They stay late and help to tear things down so that the facility can be ready for other people. There are people who show up and they're on our production team and they make our live stream possible so that we can connect with other people and reach more people with the gospel message. They're being generous with their time. There are people who are generous with their finances and who are giving to New Story Church. And because of you, we are able to reach more and more people. And this is because people are saying, yes, I'm going to invest in the eternal, in God's eternal kingdom, and not just that which is temporary. Whenever we choose to invest in the church, whether it's with our money or with our time or some other type of resource, when we choose to give generously, we are saying, God, we recognize that this is for you, that we are investing in your eternal kingdom, that we don't want to just invest in things that are fleeting, but we want to be a part of making an eternal impact that will continue to reach more and more people for Jesus. And because of people like you who are engaged with the mission and are stepping up, and if you're not engaged yet in some way, if you're not engaged in giving or serving or some other way, I want to invite you to be a part of that with us. Because when we do that, we are able to reach more and more people with the message and the life-giving message of Jesus Christ. Where's your treasure? Jesus has a conversation later on in Matthew chapter 19 with a man who is famously known today as the rich young ruler. And this guy comes to Jesus and says, hey, what do I have to do to experience eternal life? And he goes back and forth with Jesus a little bit about keeping the commandments. And he says this to Jesus. He says, I've kept a lot. I've kept all of them. I've done all those things. Love my neighbor, I've done all that, Jesus. What am I still short of? If you want to complete the set, Jesus replied, go and sell everything you own and give it to the poor. That way you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. When the young man heard him say that, he went away very sad. He had many possessions. The first and the last, Jesus said to his disciples, I'm telling you the truth. It's very hard for a rich person to get into the kingdom of heaven. Let me say it again. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter God's kingdom. Now, once again, Jesus here is addressing a financial situation with this man where he had kept all of the commandments, but then this one thing he wasn't willing to let go of. And maybe, like him, for you it is money and wealth. You're like, that's the one thing I don't know if I want to give. And maybe that's it for you. But as I said earlier, maybe it's one of those other examples, or maybe it's something else. And a deeper truth that I think this story about the rich young ruler is getting to that we need to ask ourselves is what treasure are you holding on to that is keeping you from experiencing the fullness of life in Christ? Because what I essentially hear from the rich young ruler when he's talking with Jesus, he's like, oh, I've kept all of those commandments. I did those ones. And Jesus says, well, what about this one? What I think the deeper truth of this passage is like, hey, there's a lot of things that are easy for you to keep. What's the one thing that's difficult for you to surrender? What's the one thing that's difficult for you to say, yeah, Jesus, this is yours as well. Yeah, Jesus, I want to do this your way. Some of us, we're really good with the money thing. You're really good at being generous. You're really good at, okay, maybe that's not it for you. But maybe where you're really struggling is loving your neighbor, as we talked about. Or maybe what you're really struggling with is gossip. Or maybe what you're really struggling with is being bitter towards other people. Or maybe what you're really struggling, I'm not sure what it is, but it's that one thing that you're holding on to and you're saying, oh, I'll do all those other things because those things are easy for me to do. Those things I got. Oh yeah, I'll serve. I'm one of those, I'll give my time, but I don't know if I want to give my money or my resources to church. And I'm giving my time and I'm doing this and that, but it's like, okay, I'll do this because it's easy for me to do. But what's the thing that's keeping you from going all in with Jesus? What is it that you're holding on to that's keeping you from going all in? And you're like the rich young ruler saying, I want the fullness of the life that you offer me, Jesus, but this one thing, maybe it's an addiction. You're like, oh, I'm just going to hold on to this because it gives me some comfort. I can do some of these other things. I can put on a good face. I can love people well. I can do this. I can do that. But that one thing, I'm going to hold on to that. And Jesus is saying, will you let that go today? What treasure are you holding on to that if you were to surrender it, you would experience the fullness of life in Christ? Or you would experience, maybe a better way to say it, the next step in your faith journey with Jesus. And you know that it's been holding you back. You know that it's keeping you from becoming more like Christ. You can feel it eating you alive, as James said. What is it that you need to let go of to experience more of him? Matthew 6:21, back to where we started, Jesus said, show me your treasure, and I'll show you where your heart is. What do you treasure? What do I treasure? What do we value above all else? Second question as we walk through this text today. What is your life producing? What is your life producing? One of the things we talk about here at New Story Church is that your life is telling a story. And our hope and desire is that we grow as disciples of Christ, is that the story that our life would tell is a story of new creation, a story of what it means to follow Jesus and be committed to Him. What story is your life telling? What is your life producing? What is my life producing? And Jesus uses a metaphor here that's a little bit foreign and distant to us, but that makes sense. He's teaching 2,000 years ago. But it makes sense, and it's something that we can apply to today. Jesus says this in Matthew 6:22 through 23. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is honest and clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is evil, your whole body is in the dark. So if the light within you turns out to be darkness, darkness doesn't come any darker than that. Jesus is using this idea because there was this belief in the ancient world that whatever you saw, whatever you let, the eye was like the window into who you are. If you grew up in church, it's kind of like that old song, "Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little ears, what you hear." Because what you see and hear, what you consume, will ultimately result in what your life is producing, who you are becoming, who you are. And Jesus is challenging us to think about, okay, yes, think about what your life is producing, but also what are you consuming, because that will lead to what you are producing, the story that your life is telling. I have a confession to make, and this will come as no surprise to those of you who've been coming here for a number of years now. I probably have a bit of an addiction to nonsense and foolish behavior and stupidity. I don't know what it is with me, but I maybe it's a good thing, and it keeps me relaxed at times, but I had to come to terms with this, and I'm still coming to terms with it at times, and I'm still trying to grow and become more like Jesus, but I had a bit of a wake-up moment. About 5 years ago, I was out with some friends doing something, and I worked at a church at the time. Some of you know this, I was a youth pastor. I worked at a church, and I got a group of friends together. And I have this unique talent that I've had for a number of years in my life. I've had this unique ability to come up with really stupid ideas and get other people to do them. And I didn't ever have to participate in those stupid ideas. So for example, in high school, I had this friend named Philip, and every day I would have a new idea for Philip. Like, "Hey, Philip, you should just get up and walk around in class for as long as you possibly can and see how long it takes for them to tell you to sit down. And when we go to the next class, you should do it again. And we should see how long you can get away with walking around in class meaninglessly until they tell you to sit down. Oh, Philip, you should go up to that person and just meow in their ear a million times, as much as you can." And Philip would do whatever I asked him to do or told him to do. I had this unique ability to do this, and I carried this into adulthood. And so about 5 years ago, I got a group of adults together, and I also used to schedule fights for Philip, by the way. I think I told that before. I used to schedule bathroom fights, and I would say, "Hey, what's that?" And I would charge admission, and people, and I would make money from it. But I had this. So I got a group of guys together, and I'm a youth pastor at the time. I said, "Guys, we're gonna do something together called the Night of Stupidity, and here's what we're gonna do with this night. We're going to film this. We're going to put it on YouTube, and it's going to be a great thing for all the students that we're trying to reach." I didn't really think of it that way. I just thought, let's get it on YouTube because it'll be fun. So I had a friend come and film it, and I had these teams of people that I had assembled, and I had all these stupid things for them to do. And it involved racing cars. It involved, let's go to the Galleria Mall and who can best fake fall down the escalator and see who's going to come care for the person. It involved a grocery cart race in the Target parking lot where the security came screaming at us and told us they were going to call the police. So then we went to the BJ's parking lot because nobody was there. And then for those of you who know John Morano, he sliced his leg open on a grocery cart, which was hilarious. And there was just blood all over the place. And for those of you who think this is extremely immature, Neil was a part of this, by the way, too, just so everybody knows. So we're doing this Night of Stupidity, and I said some things in the video that I shouldn't have said, like, "Hey, whoever can get the most people to flick them off in the car gets more points for their team, because I was just giving points to people. And it was a really dumb game and a really dumb idea. And it didn't go so well. Well, we posted this online, and a lot of people started watching it. It was getting some good attention. People were enjoying the night of stupidity. And I got called into my boss's office, and he said to me, Scott, we need to talk about this video. And I had a coworker, Austin, at the time, who was also in the video, and so he also got called into my boss's office. And so we're sitting there, and my boss said to me, Scott, because of the video you put out, people and students are stumbling in their faith. And I thought, okay, that's a bit extreme. I don't think anybody's questioning their faith right now because of this. But anyways, I had to take it. I was like, okay, this is not good. And I started realizing I need to grow up. Because this seemed like a good idea at the time, but it was chaos. There was other stuff in the video that we don't need to talk about, but there were other things that was happening, and like push-up contests in the middle of Walden Avenue at 10 p.m. But I was like, this is going to be a good idea. And he said, this is not a good idea. And he's like, you need to take this video down. And I started realizing, like, yeah, some of this might have been funny or fun for us, but I want to be a pastor one day. And this is not very pastoral. This is not very mature. This is producing foolishness. And I had to come to terms with this. Like, I like foolishness, I like stupidity, but I had to ask myself, what is my life producing? And the goal as somebody who's following Jesus is not to just be stiff about everything. It's okay to have fun and have a good time and be filled with joy and all of those wonderful things. But I had to come to terms with, like, this is not producing anything that is going to be good for discipleship or people following Jesus. This is foolishness. And so I had to say, this is dumb. I'm not going to do this kind of stuff anymore. And think about, what is my life producing? What gets so complicated with this question sometimes is when I look at something like that, it may not have been directly sinful, but it was incredibly unwise. And when we come to what our life is producing, sometimes we think, oh, I don't know if I have anything deliberately sinful in my life. Yeah, but do you have anything in your life that's unwise? Do you have anything in your life that is not necessarily leading yourself or others towards Jesus, but is just because all Night of Stupidity was about was so people could say, oh, isn't Scott funny? Isn't he hilarious? Isn't that so entertaining? It wasn't about pointing people to Jesus. It was about pointing people to me. This is something I had to wrestle through. And like, this is so dumb, but I'm sure you have some dumb stuff you got to work through as well. We all do. This is not what I want my life to produce. This is not who I want to become. And Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 7, later on in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, well, in the same way, good trees produce good fruit, and bad trees produce bad fruit. Actually, good trees can't produce bad fruit, nor can bad ones produce good fruit. Every tree that doesn't produce good fruit is cut down and thrown on the fire, so you must recognize them by their fruits. I would challenge you to do this. Find 3 people in your life who you really trust. They're following Jesus, and say to them, what do you see my life producing? And if all they say is good and wonderful things, say, thank you so much for that. One of the reasons you're a close friend of mine is because you're so encouraging. But can you please give me one critique as well? What is one thing you see in my life that's producing that's maybe sinful, or that's maybe unwise, or that's maybe hurtful, or maybe is reflecting that I'm not valuing God's kingdom but my own? What is something in my life that I can grow in? And say, what, can you just give me one critique? And when they give you that critique, don't get angry with them because you asked for it. Don't get angry with them and say, thank you. And then say, hey, I'm going to work on that. In 2-3 weeks from now, can you follow up with me and see if there's any progress? Or I'll follow up with you. But I challenge you to find 2 to 3 people, maybe in your story group or maybe somebody that you're just walking closely with, and say, hey, what do you see my life producing? And after they say all the wonderful, beautiful, encouraging things, say, hey, say the thing to me that nobody else will say. Give me that critique. Because that's one of the best ways that we can grow. Because we think, oh, I know where I'm at right now. I know what I'm doing. But sometimes we need to hear from other people and what they actually see in us. Because that is what will help us grow. What is our life producing? The last question is this: who is your master? Who is your master? Because whoever your master is will begin to determine what you're valuing and what you're producing above all else. Some of us, our master is our phone. It's the thing that we turn to all the time. For some of us, our master is chasing a title, as we mentioned earlier. For some of us, our master is money and finances, and our whole life is built and revolving around that. For some of us, our master is politics or the news, and because whatever your master is, that will begin to dictate how you see the world and how you see others. And there are so many people, you know who your master actually is? And I know I've said this before, but it's something we need to think about. For many people, their master is whoever they view to be the villain in their life. Maybe the villain is your boss. I just can't stand him, and you go and complain about him all the time. You complain about him in the morning. It's a subject of your conversation all the time. Maybe your master is politics. I can't stand that party. I can't believe what they're doing, and it just consumes your thoughts. You're always watching content about it. You're always speaking about it. Maybe your master is somebody in your life that's just been really irritating you, so you're gossiping about them and telling them. And you're saying, well, they're not my master. They're just somebody or something that bothers me. No, it's your master because it's consuming your thoughts and conversations. And if that person or that thing is consuming your thoughts and conversations, then it is your master because it's dictating all of who you are and all that you do. I had to come to terms with this. I was a weird kid in high school. I was really into weird comedy things like Weird Al Yankovic. I talk about that all the time. I was always watching movies. And then I was really into politics. And I was always talking about politics and watching these political things and talking about, and I started realizing this is my master because it's consuming me. It has me worried. It has me upset. It has me just talking about this all the time. And that's what was discipling me and shaping me. Oftentimes, the thing that irritates you and bothers you the most is actually your master because it's consuming everything about you. And instead, what our mindset as kingdom citizens should be is that Jesus is actually over that and in control of that. Whatever it is that's mastering you and consuming you. Jesus says this in Matthew 6:24, nobody can serve two masters, otherwise they will either hate the first and love the second, or be devoted to the first and despise the second. You can't serve both God and wealth. Once again, Jesus' emphasis here is on money, it's on wealth, but what is your thing? Maybe it is that, but what is the other thing that you keep trying to add to Jesus? Jesus and this, Jesus and that. What is it that is competing for your heart that you're allowing to be your master over Christ? And it's keeping you from becoming like him. The psalmist warns of idolatry in Psalm 115. And he says this in Psalm 115, verses 5 through 8, about idols. They have mouths, but cannot speak, eyes, but cannot see, ears, but cannot hear, noses, but cannot smell, hands, but cannot touch, feet, but cannot walk. They cannot even clear their throats. Those who make them will end up like them, as will everyone who trusts in them. He's talking about the physical idols and how they have mouths but cannot speak, and those who worship them will become like them. We become what we worship. And we could simply look at it this way. This entire life that we are living here on planet Earth is about conforming to an image. And we are daily making decisions as to if we are conforming to the idols and the masters of this world, or are we conforming to the image of Jesus that we were created to live in? Because every single one of us bears the image of God, every human being. And Jesus was the image of the invisible God. Jesus demonstrated for us what it means to be truly human. Jesus is the new Adam, and so it is in Christ that the image of God becomes restored in us. So then any other image or any other thing that we worship is just a counterfeit of what we were intended to live in. And every other image that we worship, we become like them. And what the psalmist is saying is those things are a counterfeit. They have eyes but cannot see, mouths but cannot speak, ears but cannot hear. The idols that we worship, the things that we allow to master us, they're counterfeit and they're temporary and they're fleeting. But unfortunately, when we give our lives to those things, we become those things. But when we give our life to Jesus, He continues to reveal to us how we can be more and more conformed to his image. So when we treasure Jesus above all else, what we're actually doing is choosing to be conformed to the image that we were intended to live in. So as we become more like Jesus, we become more salt and light. We become the kingdom people, the Sermon on the Mount people that we've been talking about through in all of this series. And Jesus will take our minds and our hearts and our things that we have that are so cluttered, and he will bring clarity. Jesus will bring clarity to what we value when we seek his kingdom first above all else. Jesus will bring clarity to what it is that we treasure and value and hold on to. Jesus will bring clarity to what we should and should not be consuming, so that we will have clarity on what our life should be producing as we seek to produce good fruit and not bad fruit, as we seek to produce that which is eternal and not that which is temporary. Jesus will bring clarity as our true master, as our true king, and design us into the image that we were intended to live in. We could say it this way: clarity will lead to simplicity and liberty. The clarity that only Christ can bring will lead to simplicity, because Jesus lays out clearly in Matthew 5, 6, and 7 who we are to become. But that simplicity also leads to liberty. It leads to freedom. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. All of the other masters and that which is temporary, they will keep us in bondage, they will hold us back, but Jesus will bring a freedom to our life that only we can have in him. Living for eternity will bring a freedom to our life and bring a freedom to our hearts that only can be experienced in Jesus. If you would please bow your heads and join me for prayer in this